StoryHinge, Episode 85, David Phillips.
I've been doing this profession for about 20 years, and I've looked into every single discipline that there is, and there is simply no other tool or no other technique which is more powerful than storytelling. So the story is the race car and the driver. If the driver is bad, he won't win a race. If he's good, he'll win every race. But even if you're a really good race driver and you get a bad car, you'll still lose the race. So you need to have both. You need to be able to deliver a story and you need to be able to build a story. And the brilliant thing with this is that it's not talent. It's just skills.
Welcome to StoryHinge. At StoryHinge, we explore foundational ideas and beliefs. We believe everyone has a beautiful story to grow. Now here's your host, Jason Vidaurri.
All right, welcome to StoryHinge. Today's going to be a blast of an episode, speaking with David Phillips. David has been investigating from a young age his brain, his own brain, and also how our brains function and how they deal with communication and what are the most effective ways to communicate. And through that, he's created a company built around delivering power as well as speaking in front of audiences. And there's an element of storytelling within that as well that we'll investigate. So with that, David Phillips, welcome to StoryHinge.
Hi, great to be here.
All right, David. Well, really excited to be able to talk to you and to finally connect with you after several tries. And
yeah,
I first read into your work quite a while ago, actually, looking at your TED Talk and talking about story. And it wasn't until sometime later I go, you know what? Now that I focus more on story itself, I said, I want to reach out to this David Phillips and see if he has something to share with us. And but here at StoryHinge, we like to go back a little bit and start and hear a little bit of your story and how you got to where you're at today.
Sure thing. I think the best place to start, because what I do is mostly focused on the brain, on our biology and our neurology, which is pretty rare in my profession. It happens, but it's still rare. And all this came about that when I was around 16, my mother, she was a philosophy teacher. And one day she came into me and she gave me this book. And I remember that if you're a mother in your kind of right set of mind, you don't give this book to an already existentialistic breaking down teenager, because the book's name was the Existentialism by Jean-Paul Sartre. He's a French philosopher. And it really messed up my head, because I went through such a conflict in myself, and I started understanding that, my God, whatever I learn in life, it doesn't matter if I don't know how you as a human being works. You got approximately 1.2 kilo of brain mass, which defines everything that you are. If I don't understand that, it doesn't matter what I learn in life. If I become a pharmacist, or if I become a fireman. So I started studying behavioral science and neurocognitive psychology. And at 17 years of age, I bought my first electroencephalograph, an EEG. I don't know. Have you got one of those?
No, I don't.
No, it's pretty rare. So I bought that when I was that young, and just to study my own brain, how it responded to different kind of communication and stimuli from my screen or whatever I was watching. And since that day, I've just been passionately in love with the subject of how does the brain correspond biologically and neurologically to communication. And that's also, so my profession is presentation skills. That is my passion. But within presentation skills, there are several disciplines, and one of those disciplines is storytelling. And that's, where you found me.
Yeah, that's where we tie in a little bit. Well, let me hear a little bit about how that manifests through your life. You had this interest pretty early on, and you went and studied this in school and kept pursuing it, or how did that work out?
I tried to go into university, but it was a bit too slow and it wasn't practical enough for me. So this led me to working at, my first job was at Microsoft as an IT technician, but didn't really suit me because I was more into the humanistic side of it. I like technology, so I like the mix. I had like one of these commit careers I got promoted, and I had really brilliant jobs. I was a training manager for a company of 4,000 employees when I was 21 years old. I got headhunted to London as an e-learning director when I was 22. And I got a prize from IBM for the way that we built pedagogical models within the company. So I had an amazing start. And about 23 or 24, I just came to the conclusion that I wanted to start my own thing. And since then, I've been running my companies in regards to communication and presentation skills. And I think it's when I started doing the TEDx talks, the death by PowerPoint and the storytelling one, when it really exploded. And I've been doing so much international work on both those subjects.
Okay. Well, great. And I guess you're from Sweden, is that right?
Yeah. My father's from England and my mother's from Sweden. I've been brought up in the land of the Vikings.
Okay. Well, you remind me of in college, I lived with a couple guys from Sweden. We had a house lived in a house with about 8 of us. And it was a good time. And I remember this one thing though. I have to just bring this up. This kind of off topic here, but they brought this. I think it was like fermented fish or something.
Oh yeah.
It was powerful. I'll say that. we're like, what is this? They go, here's something for you guys to try.
Oh, it's that smelly one, isn't it? We got 2 versions of it.
Yeah, we had to put it outside pretty quick.
Yeah, I think we Swedes, we love torturing people with that fish and licorice, those 2 things. Yeah, well done. You survived.
Yeah, we did. Well, great. You're right. My interest was to hear about that story and how that fits into life's improvements. And I mentioned before that in season 1, I got to talk with a lot of people about their lives and their diversity in their life, but and stories seemed to come out as one of these things I felt like was fairly untapped in ourselves and looking at our own story. But story in general, I thought there's probably some more work that we should be doing with story to live more powerfully, I guess is how I frame it.
Yeah.
And in terms of presentation, where do you see story fitting in?
Oh, practically any presentation at all. It is. I've been doing this profession for about 20 years, and I've looked into every single discipline that there is, and there is simply no other tool or no other technique which is more powerful than storytelling. It just consumes the brain of the listener. If you build the right story for the right purpose, you can use it in any kind of presentation.
Okay. And I know from your TED Talk, you kind of had a bit of a formula there, or I think you called it a cocktail on how what's good storytelling. You want to briefly take us through that and help us understand some of those elements of a good story?
Sure thing. Yeah, absolutely. It's when you build presentations, one of the key elements, which I always do when I build them, is that I ask the customer, which emotion do you want the customer to feel? And the people listening to you, because that emotion will drive their logical decisions. And you then come to the question, what is an emotion? Well, as far as we know today, based on biology, an emotion is a particular cocktail of hormones and signaling substances. So depending on which cocktail you have in your blood, you react in different psychological ways. So you behave differently depending on which cocktail you have in your blood. And the TEDx talk I did, I have so much fun with that when I deliver these seminars, because when I just tell the audience that, hey, I'm going to increase your dopamine levels by 50 to 100%, depending on where you are at the moment. And it's going to be nice, it's become greater and greater, and then it's going to become painful, and then it's going to become good again. Are we all okay with this? And you can see their skepticism. They're going like, you're not doing that to me, man. You're not gonna increase my dopamine levels. And then I do it, and they can't help it. And they're so baffled by this that it can be done so easily by one particular story. And then I show them what is called what I call the angel's cocktail, which is what can be defined as the nice signaling substances, where you got nice levels of serotonin and oxytocin and dopamine and endorphins. And then you have the devil's cocktail, which is cortisol and adrenaline. And depending on which one, if I put it like this, if you come into a customer, if you come into an audience and they have the devil's cocktail in their system, they are stressed, they are not focused, not on you at least. They become critical more easy. They are not as creative as they can be. They won't remember what you're saying as well. Compared to if they've got the angel's cocktail, that means that they're motivated, they're engaged, they're open, they've got great memory, they're creative, and everything works. So the question is then, but how can I change this in people? And that's the beautiful part of storytelling. I call it I put it like this. It's a tool where you, with almost surgical precision, can inject exactly the hormone you want in the person that you're talking to get the psychological effect that you desire. No other tool can do that. So that's kind of the cocktail. And then you have to go down to the hormones and the signaling substances themselves and look at them. And obviously I don't have time to go through all of them in this podcast, but in the TEDx talk, I think I launched 3 of them. I got dopamine, which is your. Do you want me to go through them now, or?
But just real briefly, I think dopamine is that we can say what it's caused by. It's that suspense, that hanging, that tension feeling. Is that correct?
Yeah. So whenever you got an audience where you want their focus, you want their attention, you want them to crave what you're giving them, you need to create dopamine. So dopamine is the only signaling substance that you need to create in every single presentation. If you don't create it, they are the opposite of focused, attentive, creative, and they won't remember a lot of what you're saying. So you need to create this in every single presentation. The other hormones, they're just optional.
Okay,
and dopamine, you create that by creating suspense and cliffhangers. So you create stories that give the opportunity for those things. For instance, if you want your audience to become more generous and you want them to like you more, you can create oxytocin. It's the dark side to oxytocin as well. If they don't like you and you try to give them oxytocin, that won't work very well. They have to like you to a certain degree, and then you give them oxytocin. So how do you create oxytocin? Well, you do that simply by adding an attachment to a character. Often when you watch a movie, you can see that the scriptwriters, they have created situations where the character is failing. And whenever they fail, we feel empathy. And whenever we feel empathy, that is the emotion of oxytocin. And what's really scary with oxytocin is that, for instance, there was a TV series called Breaking Bad. Did you see it?
I have not seen it. Of course, heard about it.
Yeah. Okay. So there's millions of people all over the planet watching this, and they are rooting for the bad guy. They're rooting for him to deal drugs more efficiently, kill people more efficiently, deal it to younger people, build a drug empire, earn more money, kill the police. They are rooting for this person. And we've all done that. We've all been rooting for the bad guy in one movie or a TV show or whatever. And it goes against all your morals and ethics, but it can so easily be done by oxytocin. You just, as a scriptwriter, you focus your oxytocin to the character you want to feel empathy for, and you can create loving feelings for the bad guy. So it's mega super powerful if you use oxytocin in the right way in presentations. And then, I think I went through endorphins as well in the TEDx talk. So endorphins it's a hormones that can be produced when we go out running or go to the gym, and its main purpose is to reduce pain. The beautiful thing with endorphins is that it lowers our critical thinking, and the beautiful thing in storytelling is that if you want to lower your audience critical thinking, you simply make them laugh. If you make them laugh, they'll produce endorphins, and they will be less critical towards what you're saying, and they will be more open, and they'll be more happy, they'll be more trusting. It's got a lot of beautiful effects.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. I mean, just when you think about that, in the power of story itself, like you said earlier, it's that I'm often fascinated how when you start getting into a good story, you lose a bit of yourself, and you're not. If it's a good story like this, and I think it's often hitting these things that you're talking about, and you're in there, you're not critically thinking, you're enjoying it, you're those chemicals are going off in your brain, and our walls come down in a lot of ways, and that's always just fascinated me.
It's strange, isn't it? And it's my conclusion, which I deliver in the TEDx talk, is that the more emotionally invested a human being is, the less critical they are. So the more emotionally invested you are in a football team, it doesn't matter how bad they are, you'll still defend them. And the more emotionally invested you are in your girlfriend or your boyfriend, the less critical you will be against their particular behaviors. And life just works that way. And when it comes to a story, the more emotionally invested you are, the less you focus on if it's exaggerated or if it's false. You have to put yourself outside of the story. But we enjoy stories. We enjoy these hormones. We want them. We desire, we crave them through life. So therefore, as soon as we hear a story, we go like, "Oh, I'm going to invest myself in this because then I'll get high from these hormones."
Mm-hmm. And David, I guess I'm curious on how you went about discovering this or researching this, or what was your process on getting a better understanding about this?
Well, there's quite a number of studies done on oxytocin and storytelling specifically. So those were pretty easy to find. And studies have shown the same thing with endorphins and laughing. So that's kind of a no-brainer. Just build stories where people laugh. The same thing goes for serotonin. So I guess what I did is that I took all the studies that have been done on signaling substances and hormones, and I kind of crossbred them. I put them all together into one subject. And I've seen people do it with single hormones, but I've never seen anyone do it with the full spectrum of them in the way that I did. So my accomplishment was more or less that I put it all together. And then obviously I've been testing and trying and elaborating on which way do I get the best effect with my audience. It's very hard, for instance, to measure serotonin levels. It's almost impossible. It requires incredible amounts of time and equipment for that one in particular. But I can look at a person and I can see. I assume you can see when a person is proud. Can you see that?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So we know that when a person is proud, they release. That is, serotonin is the reason to feeling that sensation of being proud. So obviously, I can look at a person in my audience and see that they're growing with their pride, and so I can see that their serotonin levels are increasing. But some of these are almost impossible to look at from a biological perspective, from a lab. One day we might, but testosterone is easier, for instance. That can be checked in your bloodstream.
Yeah, I guess I think in part the reason your message resonated with me is because I had, through my work here at StoryHinge and talking to people and studying story itself, it seemed to fit right in with the way I had observed story and the powerful story in myself, and saying, okay, when do I really find a good story? Well, it's when I'm, there's that good tension in there, and that I'm taken through that kind of some ups and downs with that tension. And of course, you're caring about that. And then for me, it's like if you also bring in some humor and some laughter, and that even enhances it even better. And so it very much aligned up with my own experience. That's probably why it resonated so well.
It's pretty common sense, isn't it?
Yeah, it does. After when you break it down that way, it's like, oh yeah, of course, it's that way.
But that is what amazes me with movies. I don't know if you've ever thought about it, but some movies are just boring, aren't they?
Yeah.
They just tend to linger and nothing happens. I just don't get it. If this knowledge exists and you got a budget for like $200 million, how on earth is it possible to just not live through this equation. The only thing you have to do is see to these hormones are released now and then during the entire script of the movie. Boom, you got a blockbuster. It's, the equation is so simple.
Yeah, maybe that's why, because it is too simple, and we think it's more complex, or we have to do more than that. Maybe that's part of it.
That is true. That could be true. I don't know. Maybe it's just, I don't know how. Have you ever been in contact with like a movie house? How they build scripts. Do they build it from hormones, or are they just, I don't know, guessing or hoping for the best?
Sometimes I think there's different processes from what I gather. I'm not in that industry and I haven't really talked to anybody in that area yet. But there's different processes that go through, and it depends on who's doing it. But you're right. When you break it down that way, it's like, gosh, have these core elements in there, and then build your story around that, and you'll be good.
Yeah, that is. Yeah. So if anyone is listening to this podcast and you're in any way you're making movies, give me an invitation. I'd love to come and help you.
Yeah.
Maximize the movie. That'd be cool. That'd be a cool experiment.
No, it would. It really would be, and it'd be a lot more enjoyable for us audience members as well.
Yeah. It would be so awesome.
I guess I want to talk just briefly about also I know you do some work about presentations and death by PowerPoint. And I guess first I'll just throw a plug in there. I know I ran into those videos as well, and my brother was just about to give a presentation to about 100 professionals in the medical industry. And I said, well, check out David Phillips. I ran him through my study and preparing for this discussion with you. I said, well, check that out and see what you think. And he watched it that night and applied it to his PowerPoint and presented it the next day. And he said it was real good. He said he thought it felt tight. It felt focused, especially compared to the other presentations that day that went on. He said he felt like the people understood his, where some of the other ones are just, because you're in medical, there's medical jargon going on. There's, you have various professionals out there who have different expertise levels. But he felt like his was really tight. So I guess that's a personal plug for you. But how does story fit into, say you're giving a presentation? We hit it a little bit already, but do you just throw a story in there? How do you weave that in there to make a more powerful presentation? Or do you?
Yeah, you do. So you look at your presentation, say for instance that is 30 minutes long. You ask yourself, when do I want to enhance this or that particular trait in my audience? Do I want, if you're going to pitch your idea, let's say that you're going to say something that they might be critical against. Okay. So that would be an awesome thing then to produce oxytocin just before that. Okay. So you plan for, okay, before I'm going to say this, I should have a story which produces oxytocin. And then we look at testosterone, for instance, which is almost the opposite, because testosterone makes us cocky, makes us risk-taking, willing to take risks. Obviously, that should not be placed before you're going to say something critical. That would be insane. So you would place oxytocin in that case, and then you would place testosterone further on when you want them to actually take action. When you've already won them over and you want them to take action, you'll place a testosterone story further on. So yeah, you would look at your presentation based on when would these traits be good to have in my audience? Yeah, does that make sense to you?
Yeah, no, it totally makes sense. Yeah. And where do you pull stories from? Is it, do you just find a story, or I guess I'm wondering on that, or a personal story, or do you look out around for stories that seem to match that, or do you have a certain process you do yourself?
Yeah, I've got a great tip for you who's listening to this. Is just when I coach people in storytelling, I ask them, how many stories do you know? And they usually go like, I know maybe 30 or 40. And then I ask them to start writing down the stories that they tell during their workdays and private hours and so on. So just if they tell a story to somebody, they just write down the title of it. And 6 months later, they've written down 200 stories, because we tell so many stories, and some of them just like 20 seconds long or 30 seconds long. but we tell so many stories. So the first thing I did was just write down every single short story that I told people about what had happened in my life or what I've seen other people do. So this gave me like a story bank of 300 stories. And then I started looking at them and I asked myself, so when I tell this story, what happens in my audience? Do they laugh? Yes, they do. Okay, cool. So this is an endorphin story. This one, it makes them feel empathy. So this is an oxytocin story. So I actually classified all my 300 stories based on which signaling substance they released, more or less.
Mm-hmm.
Which means that whenever I am going to build a presentation for a client or for myself, I can look and I can go like, ooh, well, we could pick this one because this one would work and this one could work. So I've got my own like private library of stories, and then I've got the stories I've heard other people tell, and I've classified them all after hormones. So that's a process I've gone through. But a super cool thing is as well is for all of you who are listening, just look at any object in your home, and I'm pretty sure that you've got a story behind that object. Every single object we have in our home has a story. And it's pretty cool when you realize that.
That's pretty cool. Yeah, and you said that, and I'm looking around where I got my desk here. I've got a stand-sit desk, and there's definitely a story why I bought that desk. And then I had a little dresser right over here. I was like, I just bought that the other day because we just moved. So yeah, there's a story behind each one of them. That's pretty cool.
Which means that you've got thousands of stories just looking at the objects at home. Now, some of those stories might not be entertaining, but I can promise you some are. And it's just write them down.
That's a good point. And that's another thing I guess I found in my own, as I've tried to increase my own stories or even just reflect upon my own life and the stories within it, is I found an enhancement in the story itself, and I guess more lessons started to come out of those same stories that have always been with me as I've started to write them down and to share them and to think about them more. So I think there's a lot of work we can do in that. So David, I guess I want to understand your work you do today. I mean, it sounds like you do a couple different things, and I want to make sure we have an understanding of that for the audience.
Yeah. So what I began with saying is that my fundamental, so I stand on is presentation skills, and storytelling is one discipline of that. How to avoid death by PowerPoint is another discipline, and so on and so forth. And I've got many disciplines which I train people in. But what I've been working on, and I'm really proud of because it's taken so much time, in 7 years, is I've studied 5,000 speakers and to distill the small elements that make a great speaker great. And I came to 110 individual steps, which means that if you fulfill all these 110, you are mesmerizing, you are brilliant, you are like a magnet on stage. If you fulfill 20 or 30 of them, people will not look at you. They'll fall asleep. They'll look at other things, whatever. Yeah. And it's super cool. So the tool I'm releasing now, I'm launching it in September. I think it'll be one of the world's most advanced coaching platforms for presentation skills. And the way it'll work is that you can send a video into the system, and then one of my trained coaches or I will go through the 110 steps and value each single one of them. And you then get a visualization of which of these 110 steps you're strong at, which ones you're weak at. You get a full communication profile. And then the coach picks 5 of the areas that you need to work on. And then you can go in and work on those with mini courses and exercises and practices. And then as soon as you've done that and you're like, oh, I'm good at these 5 now, I'm brilliant at them, then you send another video, the coach goes through that again, gives you a new score, and then 5 new areas to work on. And obviously there's a gamification part of this where you get a medal, where you can either be a silver, gold, platinum, or a diamond speaker. And you can then use that accreditation to prove your skills. So you can say, I'm a platinum speaker from David J.P. Phillips. All these will then be listed on a website called theworldtopspeakers.com, where all the world top speakers will be listed. You can see, you can go in and you can look for like, I want to watch diamond speakers, and then you can go in and watch them.
Well, that's pretty cool.
So yeah, the 110 steps of excellence will be super cool.
Now, is that out already, or is that something you're working on? Oh, you said already, didn't you?
Yeah, it will be launched in September. Yeah. So we're more or less beta testing it now.
Okay.
To have it ready.
And who would be the ideally for this service? Who's your ideal customer on that?
Well, actually, it would be anyone who presents. So imagine your brother. He wants to know what are my weaknesses and where are my strengths, and then this will cost around $550. So he sends in a video. He gets a complete analysis and a full feedback, which usually would cost loads more because you would need a private coach.
Yeah.
But then you need to work on these 5, do it. And he does that, and it'll make a considerable difference to his presentation skills. And so, yeah, it would be anyone who wants to know where they are, how good they are, what their weaknesses and strengths are, and what they need to work on.
Okay. I guess I'll put myself in that position. I go, if I went for something like that. But I don't really give very many presentations at this point, or I'm not really in that, I guess. I do some professionally, but not that many. But I would like to do more. So how would someone like that in my position be able to do with your service?
Well, you could still, even if you don't do it yourself, with a webcam for 20 minutes where you deliver, or 15 minutes where you deliver a presentation about something. And then based on that, we'll give you feedback.
Okay.
Which means that you will be eager and there are more opportunities to deliver presentations. And I think what was beautiful with presentation skills, or really so my why I do this is because I find it to be unfair that people aren't giving the same opportunities to learn how to communicate and present. And that impacts their life. It impacts their ability of being a partner. So they usually get divorced more than any other people. It impacts their ability to being a parent, communicating with their kids. It impacts their ability of gaining and getting and maintaining friendships. It impacts their career. It impacts everything because we communicate and present almost all the time. It's as often as we breathe, we communicate. Sometimes we communicate with ourselves, and sometimes we communicate with others. But we communicate, and it's like the major subjects of becoming better at that has a great impact in everything that we do.
Oh, that's a good point. And I guess so. You're saying this not only is just for a presenter, but that it also applies just in your everyday communication and being more powerful and more. Is that part of the message?
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah. So yeah, if you stood up, you delivered a 15-minute presentation, I could give you, maybe you're failing on 3 or 4 very clear things that is bringing your ethos down, your credibility as a person down. And I can give you feedback on that. And then the next time you present, you're just talking to someone in the corridor, I was not supposed to do that particular hip movement because whenever I do that, it brings down my credibility. So you can still learn from it, yeah.
No, that's very powerful because you're right. I mean, we're constantly communicating with those around us, and even with ourselves, like you mentioned. And to be able to do that more powerfully has to have a huge impact on your life and where you go and your relationships and everything.
Everything, yes, absolutely.
Now that sounds like a great place to be working at. And what brought you, I guess, to this place of working with communication and trying to improve it? You said it's your why.
Yeah. Well, I coach a lot of people, obviously, speakers and managers and whatever. And I wanted to find a tool where I can systematically move a person as efficiently as possible from A to B. And just going with my gut feeling and my knowledge wasn't enough. I needed to break it down into details. And so I did. And now when I meet a manager, for instance, first time I score them, maybe they score 4.5 on a 10 grade scale. And then I give them 5 steps, which they do as a homework. And then they come back and then I score them at a 5.2. They get another 5. And then I score them at a 6.1 and it increases. And then when we're up at a 7, they don't need to go any further. And when they go back to their work, they get promotions. They get a happier family life. It has such a great impact on them. And I've never systematically moved people towards a number is what is cool about it.
And what's the process time look like on something like this that you're able to help people move from 4 to 7, say?
Well, a lot of people, they fly into Sweden to my training facilities here, and then it usually takes 2 full days. I can move them from a 4 to a 7, and that makes an impact in their entire life. If they don't have the opportunity of flying to Sweden, this can obviously be done then through the online tool, and it depends on how much you practice, but it'll probably take you 2 or 3 months to go from a 4 to a 7. And yeah,
that's good.
Make a big difference to them.
I think that's a good message for a lot of people out there, because it's something, no matter where you're at, deal with people in different professions and different places in life, and it's it's foundational to all of those relationships, and like we said, so it's a great thing to have out there. So I encourage us all to check that out and find some improvements in our communication.
Yeah, because storytelling, if that's what you're into, is only having a story. It's only half of the equation. If you can't deliver it, you're smoked. And if you can't deliver it, it's almost like it doesn't really matter that you had a story to begin with, because you need to have both. I usually do like a similar bit between a race driver and a race car. So the story is the race car and the driver. If the driver is bad, he won't win a race. If he's good, he'll win every race. But even if you're a really good race driver and you get a bad car, you'll still lose the race. So you need to have both. You need to be able to deliver a story, and you need to be able to build a story. And the brilliant thing with this is that it's not talent. It's just skills. And anyone can learn it. If anyone listening, or you or whoever, within 6 months, they can have such a considerable difference in their presentation skills. It's mind-blowing, the change you can make to a person's career and life.
Is there anything that seems real prevalent that people seem to lack or need to develop mostly as you've coached people through this, or does it vary quite widely?
I would say that the 2 most common problems that 2 most common steps that they miss out on is they don't pause when they present. They go, they got filler sounds.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's one of the key things to get rid of in a presentation. And the second one is that we usually don't use functional gestures enough. So using gesturing with your hands and so on, you got non-functional and you got functional. Most people use non-functional gestures. They just wave their arms sporadically, irrespective of subject or what they're talking about. Some gestures add up, but not a lot. But when you start using functional gestures, my God, the difference in a presenter is mind-blowing sometimes, because suddenly you're using a second language added onto the first language, which is multiplying the effect towards the audience.
Yeah, no, that's good. Totally can see that. As you studied these 5,000 speakers and stuff, was there anything that really jumped at you that surprised you? You're like, oh, I never saw that as being a real key.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, I think when I began, I had 70. So yeah, the last 40 steps were like, wow, yeah, that's cool. Okay, that's cool. So yeah, I think I don't know let's see if there was anything that particularly. I think maybe it was the register. That was pretty mind blowing to me. The voice register is so when you talk, when you got a deeper voice, study after study shows that they are so they are more successful, they've got better love life, they've got better relationships, they've got better careers, they earn more money. There's so many studies that show that if you got a lower register, you have so much to gain from it. So Margaret Thatcher, for instance, she practiced the register particularly in order to gain more confidence or more credibility when she spoke.
Oh, that's fine.
So now I'm talking in a lower register, but if I go up to a normal register, I talk here and I speak in a slightly higher register. But if I go up here, then I speak in a really high register. So depending on where in this register you are, it makes a tremendous impact to everything in your life. When I started listening to speakers and I heard that their register was slightly too high, I just asked them to start practicing to speak lower down. And they started practicing that, and and just that one step in these 110 makes a noticeable difference in these people's lives.
That's crazy. No, that's a good point, because I think that's right, and I've heard how you use that, and it just brings that authority. If you speak at that a little bit lower, it feels more powerful. Like this person, maybe it feels like there's confidence there. Where if you come up higher, it feels like you're almost asking the person to come with you instead of lower. Yeah. It feels like, hey, I'm here, come with me.
Yeah, exactly. That's a good analogy. I like that. That's great.
Well, Dave, before we go here, I want to hear anything else. I want to hear a little bit on I guess any thoughts on story and how we get better at story in our lives and being able to share a more powerful story. I know we've jumped on that quite a bit already. Is there anything that we missed before we move on?
No, I don't think you. I think you've covered it. I think we've covered it. Obviously, the subject is massive, and there's loads of things that you can get into. But I hope that people have been inspired by it, and that you've got some practical ideas and tips to take with you from this podcast, and you can actually use it. That would be great. I would be happy with that.
And let's make sure that people can know where to connect with you. I don't know if we mentioned that yet. Where's the best place to connect with you and your work?
On my web page is davidjpphillips.com. So that's where you can find the more about the storytelling and 110 Steps of Excellence and the programs I do. But then on LinkedIn, of course, as well. I'm happy to connect there.
Okay. We'll make sure you have them in the notes and on the website. David, I just want to thank you for spending time with us here and finding be able to make this connection and have this conversation. I really enjoyed it, and I think you have laid out some great tips for people out there. So I want to thank you for that. And I guess I see your website here, and there's a place to connect there. Do you travel around? Do you do seminars in different places? Is there other places that people can find you besides just the website?
It's mainly the LinkedIn and the website. I'm doing more and more international work, but it's mostly just corporate stuff I do. So I go to one corporation, I do a delivery for them. So I haven't got any open venues to go to. But I'd like, my passion is for people to learn from this. So I think I'd just like to summarize what we've gone through, if that's okay.
Okay, that'd be great.
Yeah. Okay, so the primary thing is that storytelling kicks ass with everything. It's just the best thing ever. Please write down your stories and then categorize them depending on the hormone, the signaling substance. So classify them accordingly. Do they laugh? Endorphins. Do they feel empathy? Oxytocin. Do they look proud? Serotonin. Do they look like they want to take more risks? Do they become cocky? Testosterone. Do they become worried or scared? Adrenaline and cortisol. Do you get their full attention? Their craving attention is dopamine. So classify them according to those hormones, and then pick the story that you need in order to get the effect where you need it in your presentation. It requires a bit of practice, but my God, it will give you such a tremendous overhand. It's incredible. And then remember that delivering a story, having a story is only half the equation. Being able to deliver it is the other half. And if you want to learn more about that, you've got the 110 Steps of Excellence. We'll give you sharp feedback on your storytelling skills or your presentation skills, whichever you desire. And I think that's about it.
All right, David, I really appreciate that. And thank you again for spending time with us on StoryHinge. Wishing you the best.
Thank you so much. Such a pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you all for joining us today. Thank you, David, again for being on StoryHinge. A few thoughts on closing, as always, or as usual. First, if you want to connect with David, you can do so at davidjpphillips.com. A few thoughts going out. First is just the re-emphasis again, right, on the power of story. I don't know if that can be overstated enough, but it is a powerful tool, a powerful way to communicate. I think David drove that home. It's an element in all our communication, and along with that is so my mind wants to go to, well, how do we do that better? How do we get better at that? How do we communicate more powerfully? And I love how David's brought into some of the scientific aspects of that, and the hormones and the chemical releases in our brain that happen during that, and how we can utilize that to create the right mixture, to create the right message through stories in our delivery. And again, another great idea and tool that we should be working on is collecting stories, collecting our own stories, putting a list together, thinking about them, and not only for the delivery to someone else and to speak more powerfully, but also just in our own self-development. I think there's an element of collecting our own stories, re-examining them. And he brought up a good point in looking at objects around our house. So I guess I can combine that idea with another one I heard from Donald Davison, who's a great storyteller. And that's go to places and to people in your history. Not asking, well, so what happened in first grade, but actually go to specific places and people. And you can combine this with what David shared, go to objects. And in those, you'll start finding stories. If you start thinking about people, places, and objects. And from that, you can start recording those and having better stories in your life. As always, love your feedback. If you have any comments, criticisms you'd like to share, I welcome that. You can reach me at jason@storyhinge.com, or I'm spending more time on Twitter these days at StoryHinge, and as well as where else. Those are the main places you can get me, and I invite you to subscribe to the podcast, share it with others, and also if there's cross-promoting for the other podcast I'm doing with my brother called 73 Mentors. If you want to deep dive into the 73 most influential people who have ever lived, that's a podcast for you. We've already spent multiple hours on Plato, and we are into Galileo. So I invite you to check that out. 73 Mentors. That's the number 73 Mentors. You can find that on any app that you're listening here, or you can find it at the website, 73mentors.com. All right, y'all. Have a great week. We will catch you in a couple.
Thank you for sharing with us at StoryHinge. We hope this time together has added more goodness to your journey. Until next time, onward and upward, and may your own story continue to grow more beautiful.